Ship around here where we got to be on time, okay? Um, I would like to call to order the workshop of the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. It's April 2nd, 2024, and the time is 1:30 p.m. Today's topic is the fiscal year 24-25 budget assumptions and spending cap. I would like to recognize County Manager Dave Horner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we discussed this morning, this is our assumption and spending target for fiscal year 24-25. And I'd like to turn it over to Pete so he can start the presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So it's about this time each year that we come forward before we have developed our operating budgets and capital budgets to kind of go through what we would recommend as assumptions for the upcoming budget development, this being fiscal year 24-25. And then, as you recall, at the board's November 1st strategic planning session, the board had asked and then later voted on us to come forward with a recommendation for a spending target. So not only for the Board of County Commissioners departments, but basically for all those entities that live within the general fund. Of course, the general fund is big. It funds county departments. It funds some joint costs, funds major maintenance, and it funds constitutional offices also. So we're all kind of in this together in the general fund. And so throughout this presentation, we will be talking about, kind of how we have come up with a spending target recommendation that then we would promulgate to all the entities that are in the general fund and ask them to, as they develop their budgets, to remain within that target or below that target, but the target being the maximum. And when I say all the entities, this is not singling out any particular office or any particular department or any particular agency. What this is in order to make sure that that the allocations within the general fund remain equitable, and that because we all live out of the general fund. At the end, we will be recommending a maximum budget development target, which would be inclusive of pay adjustments. And then once the June 1st property tax base numbers come in from the property appraiser, and then the July 1st, if they're better than what we're forecasting, then we can always plus up. Just a discussion just about some of the budget challenges that we continue to deal with. We're in a high debt environment in the general fund. The general fund supports debt, has for many years. A lot of that debt was back-ended, the principal payments in the final years, and we've been paying about $15 million a year, 14 to 15 million for the last several years. We have two more of those payments. Once those payments are done, we have no more debt. That goes away, but we still have two payments, so we have to pay about $30 million over the next 2 years. Federal funding is winding down. I should say it has wound down. Over the years, we've received CARES Act money, we received ARPA money, and we received other federal funds, federal transit funds related to the pandemic. And we have used some of those funds for transit. We have used some of those funds for emergency medical services, and in particular, emergency medical service salaries. Those funds have now been spent. The allocations for that have been spent or allocated, and we will have to build those salaries back into departmental budgets. And then, as you all know, we're continuing to experience fairly rapid population growth. This is just shows you the workshops that we have planned. May 21st, the draft capital and major maintenance budgets. First draft of the continuation budget June 18th. Second draft July 3rd, setting the maximum millage rate also. And then the two public budget hearings in September. So property tax revenues are not the only revenue in the general fund, but their largest single revenue and make up a large portion of the revenues, recurring revenues that we receive in the general fund. Tax base increased this year, 6.67%. And then each year, the State Revenue Estimating Conference, which is run out of the State Economic and Demographic Research Agency, does a forecast for each county, a 5-year forecast of what it expects property tax, the taxable base, to do. And in orange, you can see that was the March 2023 projection, about 6 months after Hurricane Ian. And in orange, you can see that the 5-year projection was very healthy. In January 2024, which is the latest State Revenue Estimating Conference, in blue, it's not quite as optimistic a picture. And I talked to both Bob McKee at the Florida Association of Counties, who's an economist, used to be the chief economist for the Department of Revenue. I've also talked to the property appraiser, Matt Caldwell, just to ask them their thoughts on this revision in the projection, and they both basically said there's a general softening in the market. Neither can give me what percentage is going to happen on June 1st, but thought that the 6.2% was a good starting point. Commissioners, you've seen this many times. In the left column is where we ended up last year as far as our adopted budget. Revenue of $619 million, expense $634, and then a gap of about $15 million. We had undesignated reserves at the time that were forecasted of $94 million, and then, as you recall, last year we made a fairly significant adjustment to reserves to pay for, out of federal funds, to pay for EMS salaries. So that bolstered our reserves last year. So that adjusted up our reserves. The sheriff had a mid-year adjustment for a variety of reasons. We had adjusted reserves. We factor in the gap and take out the capital for sheriff and other entities, and then we were projecting ending reserves of $82 million. The right column is what I'm going to go through today, so this kind of foreshadows the following charts and PowerPoint slides you'll see, but as I go through our forecasted revenues, we're forecasting in the coming year $661 million, expenses of $668. So there's still a gap, but it has been essentially cut in half. Then we have our current undesignated reserves forecasted for the end of this year are about $100 million. You apply the gap to that, you get adjusted reserves of $92 million, and then I've just put a placeholder in for capital. We always want to account for the sheriff's capital request each year, which we've asked for many years for that to come out of reserves, and the sheriff has complied with that. And then we come down to reserves about the same $83 million level. Of projected reserves at the end of this fiscal year. Our beginning fund balance was actually higher, so our reserves last year came in better than we had forecasted. A couple reasons for that. Our interest income was substantial. I believe we'd forecasted about $3 million. It came in at $10 million, and we also received reimbursement for the vaccination site that the county had at the old Southwest Florida terminal during the pandemic. And then there was some underspending in departmental budgets that was returned to the general fund. So through all that, we were able to reinstate growth increment funding, which we had suspended, and also we were able to pay for all the sheriff's capital projects. We just held that off a couple months to see where we would end up at the end of the fiscal year. You'll also notice in there that we don't carry a lot of reserves typically in the general fund, but we do have a couple reserves for FEMA Ian-related reimbursements that we are expecting. So that's where we come up with our $99 million at the end of this year, the forecast.
Please. Pete, I know we go through this process and we close last year's budget like $81 million. You go to the next page, which you're on, how does it go to 110? because I can't tie 110 back to anything. Your page prior, we closed the fiscal year out at around 80 some odd $million.
Okay, so how you get,
To 110, and no place on the spreadsheet does I understand how you got to 110.
okay, so, and you're correct, Commissioner, that's left off. So the beginning fund balance at the beginning of this fiscal year, which would be October 1st of 2023, was 125 million. So that you've closed everything, you have all of your revenues, and you've got all your budgets that are closed out. So that ended up being 125 million. We have a gap of 15 million, structural gap deficit, so that takes you down to 110 million. Then what you do is you apply all of your carryovers. So what we had as far as unspent budget and revenues, you carry those over, and then you carry over all of your allocated expenses that have been appropriated. So a big part of your beginning fund balance is applied to major maintenance projects that have carried over from year to year. They're $5 million. You have to carry over the revenues for your economic incentives that you've said that you're holding for folks. And then you can see we reinstated the growth increment funding. We've got some receivables in there. And we also, the board approved another $7.5 million for road resurfacing. So that's how you get to it. You have a high beginning fund balance, but in that you have all kinds of things that you have to carry over because they're obligated.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see your undesignated at 110. I see your subtraction. I see your ending 99. I don't have anything I have and how the 110 was actually. I look at the page prior, it's 81. We start off, it's 110. So I see all the adjustments. I just don't know how we went from 81 to 110.
So the 81 to the 110 was essentially you came out better about $20 million for those things I talked about. We had higher interest income. We had those revenues that we received from the vaccine.
There's no spreadsheet here to tie it back to 110, right?
Not here, but
Okay,
I can give you that. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
I just was trying to follow your math.
Yeah. So, commissioners, for the forecast of general fund revenues, what I've done is I'm showing you here the actual revenues, the actual results for 22-23, what we budgeted for 23-24. And remember, when we're budgeting for 23-24, we're actually in March of 23. So we have 6 months left of 23 to go. So we're having to do some forecasting there. And then our proposed recommended forecast for 24-25. And what I did is I looked at the major revenues in the general fund, and this isn't every revenue or every major revenue, but it's the revenues that I looked at where we trended better either in fiscal year 22-23, or we were trending better in 23-24 based on 5 months of revenue. So I can tell from that it looks like we're going to end up at the end of the year with more revenue than what we budgeted. So as you can see, the property tax revenues is just a function of that 6.2% increase in the tax base generates about $27 million. Well permits are coming in better this year and came in better in 22-23, so I upped that projection. Electric franchise fees, you can see, came in about $1 million more in 22-23 than the budget for 23-24, so I've increased that fairly significantly based on 5 months of this year. The transfer to the unincorporated MSTU is to help fund the unincorporated MSTU. It's basically those electric franchise fees. We don't send all of them over to the unincorporated MSTU. We send a portion based on what the unincorporated MSTU needs at the time. And most of this money that's being transferred over is going toward, transportation, natural resources, community parks. So I've just estimated that we might have to up that transfer by $2 million. I don't know if that's going to be the case. So that's something you can play with. Sometimes the general fund needs more, and you can kind of skinny out that transfer. Other times the unincorporated MSTU needs more, and so that you have to increase that transfer. State revenue sharing came in well in 22-23. It's tracking well this year, and I have increased that forecast fairly significantly. Sales tax sharing came in at $74 million, which was right on the budget for 22-23. I'm sorry. We had forecasted a $76 million in 23-24. Looking through 6 months of this year, it's flat from 22-23. So I'm not sure if we're going to make that $76 million this year, but I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. But I did increase that projection for 24-25. Parks revenue, parks fees, I increased the projection. That's just a function of in 22-23, after Ian, many parks were closed. We weren't charging parking fees. Now those parks are opening back. We're charging fees, parking fees as well as other fees in the parks. I discussed interest on investments. So with the legislative appropriation program that the state gave us a loan of $100 million for various emergency and permanent work. We earn interest on that money, but we have to pay that back to the state. Same for the $25 million loan that we received from the state. That loan, again, we earn interest on it, but we have to pay back to the state. The loan's not on here because currently we're using that for cash flow purposes. But for ARPA funds, the $149 million we received a while back, we do earn interest on that, and we can keep that interest. So the increase in the interest is a function of both more investments.
Yes, please. The interest that are we accruing the interest on the $25 million, or are we actually submitting a monthly interest payment?
I don't know that. I don't know when we have to pay it back. But we do track it.
My question is, we received the $25 million, correct?
Yes.
We haven't been submitting like you normally would on any type of loan, an interest payment, right?
No, we have not.
Okay, so it really comes down to 10 years from now, if and when that's actually due.
Correct. So right now we have to pay that. Well, right now we received that loan in late October of last year, and it was a 2-year loan. So October 23 to October 25. Now in the special session that the legislature held in December on insurance, they did a slight fix to that loan program to make it a 5-year program. So we're in the process now of working with the state, I'm not sure if that's not an FDEM loan. I think that comes from Commerce. We're going to work with them to amend that to make sure we get a 5-year term on that loan. So it would be 2028.
I mean, the unknown on that is it's a revenue replacement. That's what it's for. I mean, that was the intent, is to give municipalities revenue replacement. The first tranche was $100 million. All the different municipalities applied. This past session, 2 cities actually got grants as opposed to loans. I think the legislature is going to be in a box because Sanibel got $9.9 million as a grant for revenue replacement, and Fort Myers Beach got $7.5 million. So you have year 1 at Ian, we borrowed money. Been a lot of conversations about what that should be. Then you set a different precedent where you're granting money. The interesting phenomenon in that is that I appreciate Sanibel being down 33%, Fort Myers Beach being down 40%. But when you look at their assessed values, both Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach, we're out almost $25 million. Just if you take the difference in their values that are down by our millage rate. When I was in Sanibel, whatever our millage rate would calculate for real estate taxes, the county would always be double. Sanibel last year lost $4.1 million from ad valorem taxes. I anticipate that we've lost $8 million as a result of that. Again, same principle with Fort Myers Beach. So it is revenue replacement. In the perfect world, we would have received $25 million more. So the concept is revenue replacement. I think the legislature is going to have some challenges because one year you call it a loan, the next year you call it a grant. And Sanibel's already forecasted, no different than the beach, that they need another revenue replacement for next year. So that'd be 3 years in a row. So if the legislature keeps going down this path of grants, I'm just indicating that the revenue replacement loan, I don't know if it'll be a loan. Only point.
Yeah, we would absolutely love for that to be a grant if we could get that done.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, may I? So, and then following that line of thinking then, so the 25 million was really for the first year following Ian to replace the hit that we took from the property values going down the first year. We didn't get any 25 million this second year. And, you know, obviously the property values didn't rebound. So we probably were due another 25 million of revenue replacement then this second year. And could ask for that maybe going into the third year, trying to calculate how much we're still down because of the barrier islands that haven't rebuilt and see if they'll help us with that revenue. Yeah.
And I guess that's my point, is that we as lobbyists will have our job, you know, because the inconsistencies in going from loan to grant, and for those two barriers to continue to be sustainable, they need it as grants. And they're never going to be able to pay the original 15 million that Sanibel received or the 13 million that Fort Myers Beach received. I mean, they don't have the ability to pay their bills, so how are they ever going to pay that loan 5 years from now? And I believe the way they gave the money out was all inclusive. So I don't know how you forgive one, but as a grant, you're going to have to forgive all. That's my point. But yeah, we're out revenue. Yeah. You're 100% correct, Commissioner. We're out revenue as a result of those islands obviously being down, and the forecast doesn't look any better at all. So just a point of clarification. And, you know, it was, when we went up, we argued for revenue replacement. It's needed because we didn't receive the Barrier Islands' full share.
Yeah. And that's maybe a good talking point then, as we're talking to members of our delegation, that, you know, look, you know, this $25 million loan needs to become a grant, and we didn't come back a second year. And I don't know that we're going to come back a third year to ask for more of it, you know, so maybe you could go ahead and convert the first year to a grant and and forgive it, or not worry about us paying you back for that. I mean,
if we're going to be consistent with what the legislature would like and stay within our means and not necessarily raise your millage rate, this budget is tighter than it needs to be. And $25 million or any additional amount of money would certainly make things a lot better, more flexible and better. And it's an interesting point because they've created the inconsistency.
Right, they went ahead.
Loan, grant, and they're going to be a grant.
Okay.
Only point, but we can't talk any other way.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And then just quickly, miscellaneous revenue, those are things that you can't really budget for. They're just one-time things that come in. That $6.8 million reflects some FEMA reimbursement. And I did up that projection forecast a little bit. And then indirect costs, which is what the general fund charges to other funds for the work the general fund does on behalf of other funds, that is a known. It will go up by $2 million. So when you add that all up, that's about a $43 million increase in revenues. Commissioners, this is all the entities in the general fund. This is their adopted budgets over the last 7 or 8 years. I'm not going to go through this. I just wanted to show at the bottom, you know, year-over-year increase between 22 and 23 was 15.3%. Year-over-year increase between 23 and 24 was 9.2%. When you're looking at, you know, 6% and 5% revenue increases, you can see that those kinds of expenditure increases are not sustainable. This is a 5-year model we have in the general fund. So what I just went through in revenues, that is put into the top there under revenues. And then the expenditures for those things that I know what the cost is going to be and don't have to forecast it, I put that in. I know the debt service payments, how much those will be. I know major maintenance, what we've budgeted in our 5-year plan. And then for others, things that I don't know, I put in about a 5% increase factor for both the operating departments and the sheriff's budget and the other constitutionals. And I'll go through just a couple things here. So that's the revenue increases per the State Revenue Estimating Conference. The 6.67% was this year, and then you can see that's factored into the model. I talked about the transfer of the franchise fees. We can kind of up that or lower that depending on the needs of the unincorporated MSTU. You'll see in the next slide the unincorporated MSTU is in pretty good shape as far as reserves, so I may be able to reduce that. Interest income, have increased that forecast as I showed you. Then I have it going back down as ARPA funds are spent. Can't really predict what interest rates will do in over a multi-year period, but I have a kind of a reduced receipt of that over the years. And then total revenues. So as you saw on like the third page I showed you, going from 619 to 661, that's that $42 million I talked about on the last page. Growth increment funding, as you recall, we suspended growth increment funding for 22-23 because we didn't know where we'd end up at the end of the year. As Commissioner Ruane was saying, the discussion we had a little better reserve, so we reinstated that. And that's suspended until we are done with our interest payments of the $15 million a year. I think, based on how we normally end up at the end of the year, that we will have some excess reserves that then we can reinstate it. So I'd prefer to keep it suspended each year for the next 2 years and then reinstate it at the end of the year if we can. I think that's better than to use up the capacity in the general fund. Or that's the recommendation. Here's the debt. As you can see, once that's paid off, then we can bring back the growth increment funding. Total expenditures, so we go back to the third page. That's the going from 634 to 668. Our reserves, the 99.6 million I was talking about, estimated for the end of this year. Then we run it through. We run the revenues and the expenses through the model multi-years, and you can see reserves dip down. But then once the debt is paid off, they start to build back up. I don't think you'll get reserves that high because you will probably then want to start to apply money either for more capital or for there may be another a debt that's needed for to pay with general funds.
Right there, I think Commissioner Wayne has another question for you.
And I agree with you doing, Pete. You're actually suspending the growth increment funding, but it was just at our last meeting that we took $7.5 million out of reserves. Theoretically, that would have been no different than funding $7.5 million out of growth increment funding, because we actually took it out of reserves to take care of paving, not only in Lehigh Acres, but many other places. So it does give you that flexibility, and it's not like it was completely suppressed. We did use $7.5 million.
Yeah, actually we used $7.5 million on top of the 13, so yeah.
So it's just the flexibility is all
Correct.
I'm indicating as reserves keep
Right.
that flexibility. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Started, 8 years ago, the growth increment funding. That was so nice about being so flexible. And also, you didn't have the reoccurring debt where, like, sometimes if we add the expenditures in a budget, for example, our budget, the department budget, it's reoccurring with equipment, employee costs, FICA, FRS. So that was our whole motivation 8, 9 years ago. Commissioner Hammond remembers that, was to provide funding for those roads and different projects we need to focus on now, not long-term planning. So that was so great about that being flexible.
What you all did with growth increment funding was genius, because you weren't limited and boxed into a particular area with impact fees we had to spend. So I give you all the kudos in the world. Thank you.
And then, commissioners, if you look at total expenditures from the model, that's about a 5.3% increase, resulting in those reserves. This is just to show you that in the unincorporated MSTU, Generally, in the unincorporated MSTU, the increases have been a little higher than the county-wide tax base, but we put in the county-wide tax base. That's all we've got to go with now. Ending reserves, you can see with the transfer that I was talking to in previous slides, we've got a good reserve. We've always kind of had a target of 10% reserve in that fund. Not that you couldn't go below for a short time or keep it above for a short time, but we may be able to reduce that transfer and help out the general fund if these forecasts ultimately come true. So, Commissioners, the questions we have, and this is based on your direction at the November 1st workshop, is: do you agree with the proposed maximum 5% budget development target, which will be inclusive of pay adjustments, that you saw on the previous page, 5.3%, but we'd like to make it just a 5% recommendation at this point. Again, recognizing after June 1st and July 1st, things look better, we can always plus up. And then is there anything else you would like to add to the assumptions?
Mr. Hammond.
Sure, I'll weigh in real quick. Just, well, if you could go back to slide 9, I think that would help. The question is here, do you agree with the 5% as a starting point? And I think it's a good start. I really do. I think it's a good place to start because I think slide 9 is the slide that really tells the story. So, when you're building a budget, you're building a plan for how you're going to spend your money. And we look at the last couple years, well, we increased our spending by 15.3% one year and then increased it by 9% the year afterwards. That's not a sustainable rate of increase on your spending. It's just not. You can't keep increasing your spending by that rate. So I think a good place to start this year, knowing some of the challenges that we're facing, we see the real estate market is kind of softening a little bit. A good place to start this year would be a more sustainable spending increase of somewhere around 5%. And then let's get the first draft of the budget together and see what that looks like, and also see what the first round of estimates look like from the property appraiser and go from there. So I think this is a good starting point.
I agree with Commissioner Hammond. I've seen it from both sides. I've seen this side sitting here for the last 12 years. We remember the bad years when we lost 48% of our tax base, and we've got the good years now, and you start to see the market change a little. And I go back to my prior career before that, doing negotiations, contracts for different law enforcement agencies across the state of Florida, the agencies, cities, and counties where they lost revenue, and they're trying to make up, and people don't want to raise taxes. You don't want to lay people off, so I don't want to get to the point where we give everything away up front, and then we have to do these reoccurring debts. We want to be sustainable, but increase our services to the community without having to raise taxes. If there's extra money, then we either obviously use the money within the community, or then we can look at maybe rollback numbers. So, but I support the 5%.
Commissioner Lane.
Thanks, Pete. So obviously I recognize that 15.3% and obviously 9.2 isn't sustainable, but along those years we did do salary modifications, we did adjustments to that. We are the first choice of employees, so those things were necessary. I understand your proposal. I certainly had indicated in our briefings that I couldn't see us doing anything less than a 5% increase, and whatever salary adjustments, if there's any areas where we have areas that we need to make adjustments, I think we need to do that. I think we've covered most of them. I can't say we covered them all. Whenever you go through a unilateral increase to try to adjust salaries without a salary true study, you're going to have some inconsistencies, you're going to have some issues. So fundamentally, I think we certainly, just based on your initial slides, you see the decrease from the general where the deficit goes down. You see it go down because we did have corrections to do, and they were really a byproduct of y'all going through 7 years of no raises. These people have come here every day, and we're living in a world in Lee County, whether we like it or not. The construction, the demand, everything that's going on isn't helping our situation at all, because to get laborers, to get help, the demand is greater than obviously the supply, and that's creating our issue. whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's whatever. I also think that, although we may not be as optimistic, as Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach continue to rebuild, there's not a condo, there's not a resort that's really gone online. Those sales tax collections are going to certainly be plentiful when you have assessed values in both communities over $4 billion down. They have no place to go other than up. And when they actually increase their assessed value, they're going to actually pay more sales tax. So I'm going to think that sales tax is going to be more difficult to forecast. And it's really going to be a correlation between how quickly those types of communities, Pine Island, come online as they build those bigger establishments, as West Wind End, that Tony Lappy owns, just goes online. That entire project creates sales. I mean, each one of these projects are sales tax driven. So I agree with your assumptions. I agree with what's going on. I think some of the people thought the Fed was going to cut a little earlier. They're not. Inflation's still here. There's still a great demand. So I'm not as pessimistic as I think. I mean, the Dow almost by the end of the first quarter hit 40,000. I mean, we're at record highs. So I understand, but people still want to come here. We have all these issues that we're challenging. So it's going to be interesting to say the least. I think your job is difficult. I appreciate everything you've done. The only last question I have is I don't see the $25 million and how we're using the $25 million that we received as a loan. So nothing in your slides would indicate how we're utilizing those funds. Because it's a 5-year, and my understanding is that we're paying $15 million off in debt a year. So if that's a 5-year loan, the $15 million payment should be done with.
Yeah, so we received that $25 million in late October.
Yep.
And it's in a sub fund of the general fund. It sits there, as well as the $100 million from the state sits in a sub fund. And then we have a business unit that's just devoted to the expenses that are associated with Ian, both your emergency expenses and then your permanent work expenses. We used a little bit of that $25 million over the first few months for a short-term cash flow loan to solid waste. They got some reimbursement, so it's been paid back. So the plan is to use that for cash flow for permanent work at this point. It can be used for other things. It can be used for operating expenses. However, my caution would be that once that's gone, the next year you've got those expenses, but you don't have the loan.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some work to do. Obviously, as we go back up to Tallahassee again, and it's just part of the narrative I think we need to keep in the story, because it is a community coming back. We're trying to help the entire community, and the Berry Islands being off is only hurting our revenue collections. And the inconsistencies between the loan and the grant. And I appreciate, as an accountant, your conservative approach. The only thing I get comfort in is the $25 million isn't due to a time where we don't have $15 million debt payments. So when you slot it in, if we were to use it all, we are cash richer or don't have that debt payment to pay if we had to pay it back. I think it's our responsibility to make the convincing case. And I can't see the legislator forgiving some municipalities and having others responsible. That's just my 2 cents. I would love to understand a little clearer. It doesn't have to be today, but I'd love to understand how we're going to use that $25 million.
Commissioner Sandeli.
I'm not the financial guy here at the table, but I'm pretty careful with planning, and I think the ability in this budget to be sustainable, to me, is the key word. I think that's our responsibility to the community. Can we create a budget that is sustainable? And if it becomes a little bit better, we can move it up, great, but disrupting the community, because just like what happened here with FEMA, disruptions can happen in a heartbeat. You know, the Dow's not at 40 anymore after the last couple of days. So sustainability, I think I would agree with. And I think the other thing is, when we look at the communities that are building back, they're all, for the most part, tourist and retail related. And there's abundance of challenges coming back, from labor costs to material costs to margins and so on and so forth. It's going to be a tough road back. But they're not making any more beaches, so people can still go.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Let's have a quick- Pete, on that 25 million, so what do we have a plan right now for that money? Or if we don't have to pay it, if there's no, we don't have to pay it back, it'd be great to keep the money and use it, inject it into like a road project, for example. But if we don't have to pay it, we don't have to pay it back, we have to pay it back, we don't need it, why not just give it back? It's tax money, no matter if it's local, state tax, it's still taxes, but if we don't need it today, why are we keeping it? Or if we're not gonna use it, why we have it for the first place?
Well, I think you want to keep it for a couple things. One is we can use it for cash flow purposes.
Okay.
And, fortunately in the general fund, we have very good cash flow now because we have a lot of grant money in there. But we do need cash but you can only use that for a short term until you get reimbursed from FEMA. It's not like,
right.
So we can our plan is to use that for cash flow for the permanent work. So the cash goes out from 25 million. And then we get reimbursed from FEMA. Then it goes out again, we get reimbursed from FEMA. The other reason I think we should keep it is it's a 2-year loan now. If we can get it to 5 years, we did have this discussion is we don't want to pay something back if there is a potential somewhere down the road that it could be turned into a grant. Because then it'd be like, why did we pay it back?
Do we use it to fund our current CIP projects that are standing still waiting for funding?
You can use it for operating expenses. That includes payroll and salaries.
Right.
But you cannot use it for capital projects.
Right, okay, that's what I was asking. I know there's certain things we can and cannot use for, that's why I was trying to clarify, just so whoever's listening, because I don't want people to think we have $25 million sitting aside somewhere, just nothing to spend it on, so I'm just trying to articulate that so people understand it can be used. And like you said, if you put it inject into our budget for payroll and salaries, then that's reoccurring every year.
And another point I want to make.
Increase that salary is there forever, including FICA, IFRS, and everything else. That's why I was trying to, but that's why I was trying to, well, we can use that money for today, or at least this year, if we don't have to pay it back. But if there's interest on it, and we pay interest on it, why, if we're not getting interest on it, why keep it then?
But it's zero interest, so it's the interest we earn and interest income, we just pay that. It's really it.
So that's what I'm trying to say. So whoever's sitting outside listening to this meeting and they hear that, they're probably wondering, why are you keeping it? What are you going to use it for? Or at least why don't you spend it then?
Yeah. And another point I want to make, commissioners, is as you recall, after Ian, we did a line of credit. We entered into a line of credit with Bank of America for $150 million because we had big cash flow concerns.
No, it was mostly for debris removal. That was the most costly thing of the storm. Initially for us was debris removal and just local, and also for funding for payroll and other overtime.
But once we got the $100 million legislative appropriation and the $25 million loan, then we canceled that line of credit. And we're using those for our cash flow because the line of credit did have a variable interest rate. So, these are zero interest debt mechanisms.
Well, I'm just thinking about long term. 3 years from now, we're sitting here and just hopefully we can resolve what we had to talk this morning with the FEMA, with the CRS. But if it doesn't get resolved, we're sitting here 2 years from now. We have vacant properties along the river and beaches because people can't afford their insurance. They walk away, and the market even crashes even more than it is. We're looking at it being softer. But what if it changes over the next 3 years with the housing market interest rates? Just looking ahead, we don't want to be sitting here 3-4 years from now looking back and we see we lost property values again. But like, no, it'll be as bad as 08 and 09, but we'll be in that position again.
Thank you.
I guess the whole point, honestly, is, Pete, you're right. The $150 million loan was one that we not only had to pay if we borrowed on it, but we also had to pay just to have it. The legislator was obviously stepping in for FEMA's slowness and paying us back, and they gave us a $100 million loan with 0% interest. They all gave us $25 million, but it is revenue replacement. We as a county have not received the revenue that we would have had Ian not happen. Our share from Fort Myers Beach, our share from Sanibel, we're not receiving. So we instituted last September various caps as a result of it. Our budget certainly has restraints. We're not worrying about paying the light bill, but it has restraints. I do believe strongly that revenue replacement is what we advocated for. And we should use it to replace revenue. It's a safety net. If we need it, we use it. There's no cost associated with it. And quite frankly, I would demonstrate that there's an opportunity, and I agree with you. I'm not saying, Commissioner Pendergrass, we need to build roads with it, but the day-to-day expenses that we have, whether it's increase in salaries, whether it's increase in benefits, there's an opportunity to use that money if we need to, and it's there as a safety net. If we don't, but it's there for us. And quite frankly, when the other communities potentially are going to get this forgiven, I'm not asking for anything that I wasn't entitled to. We didn't receive revenue from jurisdictions because their property values were down. It's revenue replacement. It's exactly what we advocated for. It's nothing more, nothing less. Because if the storm didn't happen, we'd have a lot more money in reserves. We'd have a lot more money in our budget. And listen, I think the reason the Dow is going down is that the interest rate cuts haven't happened, and they anticipated them to. Inflation is still running high. We still have those issues we have to challenge with. We have, an organization where we treat our employees the right way. I've never in all the years running businesses did I not give people raises. I mean, it's just not something I've ever done, even during the recession. These people have gone through some really tough times. I want to hold on to the money because A, we deserve it. It's revenue replacement. B, we would have received it from the beaches. C, listen, if there's money we go up in Tallahassee, I don't see the difference between getting $9 million for the EOC or $25 million. If it's a grant, it's a grant. And if it helps us pay our responsibilities and eases the burden from the taxpayer is paying enough money. And if you just think about one thing for a second, the sales tax that we have generated by this disaster has been split between 67 counties. Hasn't come right here. So many other places have benefited from the sales tax that we paid because our boats were damaged, our cars were damaged, our homes were damaged. I just had my roof done. The bottom of the bill was sales tax. But the way that the system is divided is others get that sales tax. It's not appropriated directly here. We don't receive every dollar we paid in. So I am certainly of the belief, and that's just my opinion, that the revenue replacement is something we keep, and we advocate that it's actually a grant and not a loan.
So,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Commissioner.
Could I ask a question? So we talked about two sub-funds, one sub-fund with the 25 million, and did you say there's another sub-fund with 100 million in it?
All right, so the 100 million was it was the legislative appropriation program, which was adopted in special session, Glenn, right after the storm. It was a $350 million pot of money at the state, which was going to have various purposes. One was going to be for cash flow. Another was going to be for revenue loss, revenue replacement. So everybody put their projects in, and basically what the state said is that $350 million, you'll never get to revenue replacement. It's just going to be the cash flow one. So we submitted to the state, I believe, $200+ million of potential of damages, public infrastructure damages, that, as well as emergency work like debris removal, that we needed cash flow in order to, because we didn't know when we were going to get reimbursed by FEMA. So, and the state awarded us $100 million of that $350 million. The thing we have to keep in mind with that is that $100 million right now is attached to specific projects, and the state has told us you cannot swap out projects. So, and actually in that $100 million, the state has given us the $100 million, and they said we don't need it back anytime soon, but we've actually received reimbursement for some of the stuff that was in that $100 million. So what we want to work with the state over the coming year and Florida Department of Emergency Management is seeing if we can swap in and out projects to better utilize that $100 million.
So I had that exact conversation with Kevin Guthrie when I went to Tallahassee last time too, and that's what he wants us to do. I mean, we need to pursue making sure that we do that. So basically, yeah, you like you said, they gave us $100 million. We dedicated that $100 million to specific projects that we know FEMA will reimburse us for at some point. As that reimbursement comes in, meaning now we've got more money. We should be able to roll the money that we got into new projects to expedite them as well. Is there a way that you could give us some sort of report to show us how we're doing that and where we are on?
Yeah, well, I can show you what 100 million, what we were approved for. I can show you what we've been reimbursed for, and then I can show you what projects remain. And the projects that remain are much less than 100 million. So what we want to do is say, the ones we've been reimbursed for, can we take those off the list, and can we put in new because we've got way more than $100 million worth of permanent work.
That's what I want to pursue. Anything we can do to start to expedite projects. Because, I mean, if we could use some of that to expedite getting the pier built faster or the bathrooms built faster on Fort Myers Beach there at Lynn Hall Park, let's do some of that. I don't know. Let's look at what projects we can start to slot in there to get expedited and built back faster. Yeah. And then that'll cover us, like you said, cash flow us until we get the actual FEMA reimbursement. Yeah.
Commissioner Lane.
So, Commissioner Hammond, you're right. When we met with Director Guthrie, the idea was to give your list of projects that were potentially needed to be done. Instead of waiting for FEMA, he gave us $100 million. And he said, as long as you have projects, you can continue to recycle the money. Project number 1 goes away, you get the money back, go to project 2, go to project 3. So that's the whole intent. He's did that with every municipality, not just us. And the whole idea is just not to have to be held to FEMA to try to expedite the projects we have. I'd love to see the 2 lists, the 100 million, what were all the projects we had, what we've actually accomplished, what's left, so we all can see it, and then the 25 million on what our thoughts and plans are. Because I think it's a document we all need to understand so we can have a discussion like this and continue to understand, to your point, we all want to expedite whatever we can expedite. What we're limited to is what we submitted to them. So I believe we submitted around $215 million worth of projects, if I got the number right. They allocated 100, and the idea, Kevin said, is I don't care if it takes 10 years to get the money back, just recycle and get rid of all your projects. And as you get reimbursed, obviously go to the next project. And yeah, we'll get to a certain point where we'll have more money than we'll have projects. So that's when we have the discussion as policymakers, what do we return and when do we return it?
Okay, so it sounds like we got a good plan then on the 100 million and we're going to recycle that. So then thinking about the 25 million that was meant for revenue replacement, does that mean it's one potential use could be, let's deconstruct this a little bit. So go back to the slide that had that showed the gap that we were facing in our budget. I think it's a few before this. Yeah, there you go. So the $15.4 million gap. Is it fair to say that if the property values would have went up instead of by 6.67%, if they would have gone up by the same percentage as our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south, we wouldn't have had a $15 million gap? Because I remember when we got to the budget, our neighbors to the north and south were in double-digit property value increases, and here we were down at 6.67%. So if we were somewhere around 12 or 19% or whatever Collier or Charlotte were at, we certainly wouldn't have a $15 million gap. We would have had a huge surplus. So I think it's fair to say that the reason why we have a gap there is because of the lost revenue due to the loss in property values related to the hurricane. And we can demonstrate that by saying, look, our counties to the north and south didn't have those same kind of losses in property value. So I think it's fair to say the 25 million can fill that gap. And I think it's fair to say the next year, the balance of the 25 million can fill the next year's gap. Because again, I think that's what you're doing there. That gap you can demonstrate was caused by the hurricane damage. And if 25 million was given to us for revenue replacement, then there it is. That's how you use it.
Yeah, my only caution is you fill that gap once. So say you're at the end of the 25 million, you filled your 6.7, but next year you're going to have 6.7 again, because you've used up your 25 million.
No, because I think we start to grow out of it because the property values start to come back as those properties come back online and pay taxes again. Because I mean, you already show us by your projections, show us growing out of it as well.
Correct.
So
not to the rate we were before, but yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And again, that didn't mean to interrupt, but that dramatically changed in 9 months. You know, to your point, Commissioner Hammond, what I was trying to indicate before is you just do on the back of an envelope what we didn't receive from Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel, it's over $20 million, and I don't have Fort Myers Beach's last total, so I can certainly make an argument. We are short, and we are short for that very reason. You know, it is the aggregate of what our taxable value was before the storm. It's what the taxable value is after the storm. The difference, obviously, is what we didn't receive. And that difference clearly is creating a deficit in our budget. I don't want to sweat this. We're paying our bills, and I can't imagine what Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel does, but we're not immune, no different than the recession. We're not immune to having our property values decreased as a whole, and our revenues decreased as a whole. And I believe that, you know, we should participate no different than any other grant we receive. And I think this is an easy conversation to have, because the legislature just gave another $16 million out. And they called them grants this time. They didn't call them loans. They called them grants. And I don't believe in anything, having known Sanibel's budget, that they'll have the ability to pay back the $15 million they got. So what do? You don't let Sanibel pay it back, you don't let Fort Myers Beach, but then they ask Lee County and Cape Coral to pay it? I can't see how you do that. But I'd love to see a chart in that regard. That's really my point.
So I guess kind of what I'm hearing is, at first we kind of agreed that the 5.3 was a good starting point, and we could move that as we get a little farther down through this budget, right? Okay, and then it sounds like to me that we have some work to do with the legislature on, is this money going to get called back, or is it going to be a grant? What does that become? So am I hearing that right? It seems like we have some work to do to ask that question.
It's two conversations going on. On the first conversation, the 5.3%, great starting point, and move forward with that. Second conversation, we've got this money that we've received from the legislature. What do we do with it? And I think, you know, on the $100 million, we're good with recycling that $100 million in order to expedite rebuilding of projects that will be ultimately reimbursed by FEMA or some other source. On the $25 million that was meant for revenue replacement, I think that's where we're talking about, do we use that to close the gaps and then lobby the legislature to say, hey, that shouldn't have been a loan, that should have been a grant, like you did with everybody else.
I just think to follow up, I mean, if we have the list of projects, it's easy to say, here's the 215, here's what we did, here's what's remaining. Here's the $25 million. We can certainly extrapolate through this budget what revenue we didn't receive. Okay, we certainly could articulate the fact that other municipalities receive monies as a grant. And again, they're going to come back next year because honestly, both budgets have gaps. Again, you have to understand a property that gets fixed, okay, Siesta Key, Sanibel Siesta is going ribbon cutting on the 8th. It's supposed to come online at the end of 25. That's not going to be in the tax bill. So let's just say hypothetically that project doesn't get done in December of 25. It goes in January of 26. You're not going to see it on a tax bill at 27. It's not going to be assessed value. Those projects are just delayed. That's the issue that I guess I'm looking at. So I want to see the list of the 100. I want to see the list of the 25. I agree with the 5.3. And just so we have more clarity, so we have the tools, and then we also have information to advocate for when we go actually talk to our local delegation, as well as, you know, the overall delegation up in Tallahassee.
Other discussion on that? Mr. Harner, please.
So just for clarification's sake, on the 25 million, you would like for us to come back to you with potentially how we propose on using it, including filling in the gap. We can do that. And then the 100 million, I think we're pretty clear on, and we're good with the 5% as a starting point. Okay. Okay. We can bring that back to you.
Any further questions, statements? No? Okay, at this time, we are adjourned.